go along, readers, listeners, viewers. Always a pleasure to come to you live from the back deck at our home in Boston, New York. I never really explained it, Jay. I kind of moved the studio here because we are selling our house and moving to the southern tier, back to the greater Ellicottville, Salamanca area. So that's honestly, though, I should have done all the podcasts on the back deck because people will get the random Edmund appearance. He kind of scurries behind me, chases a squirrel here and there. Sonny, our son, he almost popped out and joined me for a podcast recently, so you never know when he'll get up from a nap. And people can't see it, but on top is sitting atop a box of Pampers. So that's what I'm propping up the laptop on, because Rocco is in the throes, baby.
Oh, yeah.
We've got about 3 sleepless nights in a row, but that's what coffee's for, right here.
A nice afternoon cup. Yeah, hey, I love the setting. I mean, this is perfect. But yeah, I mean, we're moving to the southern tier, right? Pretty soon. So you gotta make use of this home deck while you got it here. I'm sure you'll have a nice deck on the new place too. But this is a great setting. I like what I'm looking at here.
Although you've got a little PGA golf action behind you. Has your son already won a major? Is that what that's from?
Yeah, no, that's from one that I covered. I have very very little by way of autographed memorabilia, but that's a flag signed by Jack Nicklaus. So that's kind of cool. Got the greatest golfer of all time. And I think that's, and then I got like a little golf ball case back there with some. I've got his hole-in-one ball, which was pretty cool. He had a hole-in-one recently, so we kept that. But yeah, that's one of the few pieces of autograph memorabilia I have back there.
Yeah, I know there are some people in the business that love to just kind of turn their background into a shrine of photos and autographs. I don't know. That's kind of not why we're in the business, right? I don't think it should be that. But I will admit I've got an autograph behind me as well of a Deontay Wilder, a signed boxing glove.
Okay.
To support the APSC last summer down
Nice.
there, Lisa Wilson and the gang. I put in a bid, won it.
Nice.
But yeah, Deontay's coming on hard times. I don't know if we have many boxing fans that listen. I mean, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury's fights were like legendary, about as close as you'll get to all of the Rocky fights. I mean, granted, it's not that bloody. We just rewatched the Rockies, and it's hilarious watching those back, how theatrical they are. But they were great fights, and yeah, he's struggling. I want boxing to be great. I don't know, are you a boxing fan at all?
It's funny. I am, and I just have never been able to get into like MMA or UFC. But like, give me a good heavyweight title fight, and I'm into that for sure. But the UFC thing just never caught on with me. I can't get behind that. So I know that's kind of, it seems like that's kind of overtaken boxing in terms of popularity, but it's just not for me.
I don't know what the segue is, but we're here to talk about the Buffalo Bills winning their own heavyweight bout of sorts against the Kansas City Chiefs. There it is. It's been 4, and I think there's general optimism from the fan base. Anecdotally, we're both talking to friends and family members, and this time of year, you're at cookouts, July 4th stuff, Memorial Day, birthday gatherings, hanging out at the pool. I always like chatting with my wife's family, just a ton of Bills fans there. And of course, there's enough time that passes where everybody gets jacked up again. This is the year. This is the first summer, though, I feel like I'm kind of on board with the sentiment. It does feel like things could break for the Buffalo Bills. And I should say Jay Skurski is the beat writer at the Buffalo News, for those who haven't heard him here. He's a recurring guest at this point. But I don't know, man. Like, I want to get your take because personally, and I've written about it, I love what Brandon Beane did in the draft and free agency, even with the suspended guys. Like, load the hell up on defense. That's what's been holding this team back. It's the inability to make Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow, the one game, sweat at all. When everything matters, when everything's on the line, you can pull up any metric. It's all ugly. We've repeated the numbers more times than I wish we had to. Does anything change? I don't know, but I think you have to try. Yeah. You have to try to draft the Maxwell Hairston to chase those receivers. Try to draft the TJ Sanders to win on one-on-one if Ed Oliver's double teamed. Landon Jackson, there's a flyer that I love. And of course, Joey Bosa Comes with red flags, comes with risk. But if you hit, maybe that's the best that 12, 13 million can buy you, because he's got a lot to play for as well. I don't know. Like, I want to hear what you think, Jay. Big picture, the Bills moves this offseason. Yay, nay. Are they any closer to getting to that Super Bowl and winning it?
Well, I mean, they can't get much closer without actually doing it, right? They've lost by 3 points here twice in a row to the Chiefs. Once in the divisional round, of course, and then once in the AFC Championship game. And I'm with you. The status quo wasn't working, right? What they were trying wasn't working defensively. And to Brandon Beane's credit, he's recognized that, and the defensive line in particular. I think we really have to start there because that's where to me most of the change has occurred. Hairston replacing Drayton Florence, we expect as a starter, or maybe Trey White or Dane Jackson, whatever they end up deciding to do there is a big change. But really, to your point, it's making Mahomes uncomfortable, right? How do they get to him in the fourth quarter when they need a stop? Is it AJ Epinesa who's going to get around the edge and make the play? It hasn't been, right? He's had his opportunities. So you go out and get a Joey Bosa to be the closer that Von Miller was supposed to be. You draft, as you said, TJ Sanders in the second round. Interior pass rush, right? You'll hear that all the time from the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Tom Brady, I remember speaking a lot about that being the thing that made him most uncomfortable, was that rush right up the middle. And Ed Oliver hasn't provided it consistently enough for this team in the biggest moments. And so you go get a guy in TJ Sanders who, and I wrote this a couple of weeks ago, I think there's a little bit of a message being sent there in my mind to Ed Oliver. You look at the contract that he signed, the production that he has given them, it takes a huge jump next year in terms of cap hit. And I think they've got themselves an exit ramp now in TJ Sanders if they want it in terms of Ed Oliver. If he can't be that disruptor, you started by asking though, is this the year for optimism? I think one of the things to me, recency bias is a thing, right? And so we think about how the Bills played in that AFC Championship game, and I think this is the closest that they were, right? The last 2 years were field goal games, so they're close. They are narrowing the gap. There's no way that you can look at that and say that they aren't. But the thing for me that sticks out is the way that the Chiefs looked in the Super Bowl, right? They looked like a beatable team. And then obviously the Eagles did that in grand fashion, And so I think that has stuck with a lot of people. You wonder about the age for Travis Kelce, and he's been such a reliable weapon for Patrick Mahomes, has really been, next to Mahomes, been the constant there. And I know they're getting Rashee Rice back. I know Xavier Worthy is growing. I know Hollywood Brown is, ideally for them, going to be healthy for a full season. So there are other weapons there. But, Mahomes, especially in the Super Bowl, looked beatable for maybe the first time in his career. And so you wonder, how does that, play into this season? Does that continue? Did the Eagles unlock something that other teams can capitalize on? Or was it simply a matter of the Eagles had the talent level needed to do what they did in the Super Bowl? I do think, though, that when you look at the way Brandon Beane approached the offseason, it would be hard to argue the idea that he didn't look at what happened in the AFC Championship game and what happened in the Super Bowl and say, we've got to improve there. To your point, right? That's what they did. That was the focus for them. By and large, overwhelmingly, this offseason was on rebuilding that defense and coming up with a defense that can get those stops when it matters. Now, unfortunately, we're not really going to learn that until January, right? I think, so many of us at this point with this team, this coaching staff, this quarterback are ready to hit fast forward to January. We know that they're going to be a playoff team as long as, everybody stays healthy. They should be back there, The question, that we're not going to be able to answer is, in those biggest moments, do they have those guys yet? Because those are only defined by those late January type games.
No doubt about it. And it's bad business for us, right? We shouldn't be telling everybody, check in January. Nothing matters till then. There is a little truth to that. And I know the Bills have been a contender for a while now, 2019, 2020, whenever you want to draw that line. But you're talking about an entire generation of fans that don't know this existence.
Yeah.
Right? It still is crazy for me to say and hear those words like nothing matters until January. But it's true. Yeah. And that's how they should operate. When you've got Josh Allen, the best player in the league, For my money, he'll go down as an all-time great, gold jacket, now an MVP winner, married to the Hollywood starlet, making 330 million. Like you better win a Super Bowl. And you don't know how many opportunities you're going to get.
Yeah.
They've got another one right now. You brought up the Philadelphia Eagles, and that was a point I tried to mention to Brandon Beane when we sat down. Like you saw what they did to Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Carter, Josh Sweat. I mean, it was coming from all different angles. Nolan Smith. They've got linebackers, interior rushers, edge rushers. They made his life hell, and you could tell right away, right? Like we're in that auxiliary press box, or you might have been up in the cozy seat there in New
Oh no,
Orleans. I
I
can't
was
quite remember.
yeah, I was in the auxiliary seat.
Auxiliary's
Yeah.
better though, for my money.
I liked it. Yeah, you're hearing the crowd for sure. Yeah.
That's how Bob McGinn always wanted to cover the Super Bowl too. You know, he's been doing it forever. He asked for the auxiliary seating because you're in the bowl, you get a
Yeah.
sense for the action. You can hear it, you can smell it, you can breathe it, and right away you could tell that the Eagles were going to chew up Patrick Mahomes and spit him out. Nobody was open, and they were in his face like that.
Right.
But anyways, I thought Brandon Beane's response to that was interesting. When asked, like, did that game and the way the Eagles took it to him factor into the offseason? He immediately just said, I know it can be done. And he brings up those Carolina Panthers defenses, right? The 1-3 that nearly beat Tom Brady and the Patriots. And you've got Julius Peppers, Chris Jenkins, Brenston Buckner, Mike Rucker, Al Wallace, a rotational guy. I mean, that was a nasty defense that got after it. Dan Morgan, right, and Will Witherspoon were the linebackers. Dan Morgan, he worked with years later. And then in 2015, that team could have won the Super Bowl as well. Cam Newton is the story. He's the MVP. But, man, that defense, he listed those guys off. Charles Johnson, Kawan Short, Star Lotulelei, Coney Ely, Mario Addison. And I know Joe from Queens is listening. He loves the podcast. And we've gone back and forth on this, and he's rolling his eyes. He's saying, man, if you want to emulate the Carolina Panthers, well, why are you doing that? Because they didn't really win anything, and it can seem prehistoric. It can seem very mid '90s to try to win with defense in a run game when you've got Josh Allen, and I feel that way too. Like it is a little, you got to kind of think about it. But when you see what the Eagles did to Mahomes, when you see what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did to Mahomes, when you see when Brady was uncomfortable, when you've got Josh Allen as your MVP quarterback, like he can make a lot of problems go away. Like offense isn't the problem in these playoff games. I think that you got to keep hammering away. And Bean said, quote, yes, the Super Bowl reaffirmed that, but that wasn't a revelation. If that game didn't happen, I already knew what we needed to do. So just it comes down to these new faces, right? Like, can they deliver? And if you got to kind of read between the lines, but I feel like Brandon Bean is putting some pressure on Sean McDermott in so many words. I've given you these pieces. Do something with it.
Yeah.
Different results. It's not the offense. It's the defense.
Yeah. Well, a couple things there. I mean, number one, I don't want to absolve the offense totally of any blame whatsoever, right? Because they have had the ball down 3 points in each of these last two games. And, that's a situation that you would take, right? And they haven't delivered. They haven't gotten it done. And we'll talk about, one play in particular and one player later in this podcast that, you can point to rightly, wrongly, as being a part of that, right? That they didn't, get the points needed to tie the game or to go ahead. And, you think about that ball that goes through Stephon Diggs' hands the year before, right, in Orchard Park. So there were times, right? So it's not that the offense is totally without blame, but to your point, and I go back even further, right, to that Bengals game, right? The defense just hasn't gotten it done. And I do agree with you that, it's not for lack of trying, right? They've invested. They've invested in free agency with Von Miller. They've invested first-round draft picks in Greg Rousseau and second-round picks in A.J. Epinesa and now T.J. Sanders most recently along the defensive line. It isn't that and I want to make a point too about we're not saying let's press fast forward to January because of course you've got to get there. And to me, one of the things they have not done in this run is earn the number one seed. And I think that is a true advantage. Yeah, you're going to have to beat a good team to get to the Super Bowl, if not two, as the number one seed, one in the divisional round, one in the AFC title game. But, you look at the divisional round opponent, usually when you're the one seed, it's it's traditionally it's been a weaker team. You know, the Bills, their road this year was the Broncos at home, the Ravens, which was not a very that's not an easy game, and then you have to go to Kansas City, right? And so, and help me out. Who did Kansas City play in the divisional round? It was Houston, I believe, right?
Houston.
I mean, come on. I mean, Houston is not on the level of those three other teams. There was a clear separation between the
Mhm.
Chiefs, Ravens, and Bills and the Texans, right? So the Texans at home in the divisional round, and then not having to travel to play the Bills, that was an advantage for the Chiefs, and that's one thing that these Bills teams have not done is gotten that one seed. So yeah, the regular season matters. October and November and December matter for the one seed. They matter for this defense to come together, right? Because there's a good chance that in September and October, it's not going to be, it's the finished product. How could it be, right? You've got two guys signed in free agency who are suspended for 6 weeks. You've got rookies in Hairston, Sanders, Deion Walker that are all going to be, counted on to play big parts in this defense. Landon Jackson as well, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, who are going to be rookies, and so the idea that they're going to be ready to go right out of the gate and be meaningful NFL contributors, they're going to be on the field a lot, but there might be some growing pains, right? The hope is by January those growing pains are gone away and they're ready to contribute. And so yeah, the regular season does matter, but I think more what I meant by that was just the Bills are overwhelmingly the favorite in the AFC East. I think, and we can talk about this later too. We'll go around the division real quick, but they're not. I don't see a serious challenger to them again. As
They're
long as the Bills
favored in
stay
every
healthy,
game this year, for
every
what it's
game,
worth.
yeah, 17 games, right? Exactly, which is crazy when you look at some of the. They got the Bengals, the Eagles, they've got the Chiefs again on the
Yeah.
schedule,
You get
right?
him at
And so
home. That's why, right?
that's the big difference. Yeah, exactly. All three of those teams at home, and so yeah, the road schedule being what it is, I think factors into that. But that tells you what Vegas thinks about this team. That tells you what a lot of us in the media or just fans think of this team. I mean, the expectations are there, whether or not they're the preseason Super Bowl favorites. It doesn't really matter. A lot is expected of this team for good reason.
That's for sure. And we'll touch on the AFC East a little later in the pod, and we'll get to Dalton Kincaid as well. We've got a story at Go Along, chatted with him at length about psychologically what he went through after that 4th and 5, in addition to the physical stuff, which, Jay, you went deep with Dalton on that physical stuff as well with both knees. First, though, like on your point on the offense, it's true. They had the ball last drive. Let's see it. Right? MVP quarterback, like Stephon Diggs, if you view yourself as that type of talent that warrants everything that comes with Stephon Diggs, make that play. Dalton Kincaid, 1st-round pick, make that play. Josh Allen, let's see it. I get it for sure. And if you go through all these playoff games, I mean, 2019, there's the Duke Williams with 13 seconds left in the first half. Should have been a ridiculous 22-yard touchdown on 3rd and 9. He can't bring it in. Devin Singletary in 2020, he had a drop on a swing pass. If he catches that, he might be gone, and the Bills are up 16-7. Instead, they get blown out. 2021, 13 seconds. That was a perfect game for the offense, and that's probably the team and the and the offense. We might look back and say, wow, that's the one that got away for this team. 2022, they're down 24-10. Gabe Davis can't muscle in that 45-yard bomb from Allen, from Cam Taylor-Britt. They got blown out, but you make that play and it's a game.
Yeah, right.
Last play of the 3rd quarter. And then you mentioned the Diggs in 2023, Kincaid in 2024. I'll just say this, though. I went back and looked at Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, 3 of those contemporaries of Josh Allen, guys that had to try to win a Super Bowl within the reign of an all-time great, right? They had to deal with Brady. Allen's dealing with Mahomes. They didn't have to be perfect. And they got help from their defense that Allen hasn't gotten. I mean, Peyton Manning, when he won the Super Bowl in 06, he completed 60% of his passes for 224 yards per game, 5 touchdowns, 8 picks, and the 7 wins. I guess that's combined with that 2015 Broncos title run when he was really broken down. I mean, in 06, when they beat the Baltimore Ravens, he didn't have a 1 touchdown drive, 39.6 rating. I don't know. Then the next week against Brady, they finally get past him, but that required a pick six on defense. They get help, right?
Yeah.
Drew Brees, that's Super Bowl. Tracy Porter had the 74-yard pick six to clinch it. The week before, Tracy Porter had the pick on Brett Favre. Aaron Rodgers, unbelievable in 2010, that run. That game against the Falcons, he's 31 of 36, just his magnum opus, unbelievable performance. But even in that run, Tramon Williams picked off Mike Vick in the wild card game. And then in the NFC Championship game, BJ Raji had a pick six on Caleb Haney. Like, it was a little tight there at Soldier Field. And then I'm sure the Packer fans, if they're listening, and the Super Bowl, yeah, Rodgers was unbelievable. But even then, they had drops all over the place. James Jones dropped a 75-yard touchdown. There's 5 drops in all. Rodgers, if you go back and do the math, he could have had 451 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a perfect passer rating if his receivers just catch the ball. I guess my point is, shit's going to happen. Guys are going to drop the ball here and there. You shouldn't have to be perfect. Somebody on defense needs to make a play, whether you want to blame McDermott, Babbage, the coaches, or the players on defense not getting it done. I mean, even Rodgers that game, Howard Green gets a paw on Ben Roethlisberger. Nick Collins picks it off, runs in for a touchdown. Clay Matthews and Ryan Pickett converge on Rashad Mendenhall. That's a huge fumble. It was Green Bay's 11th takeaway that postseason. The Bills just aren't getting those takeaways. They aren't getting those plays. Outside of Terrell Bernard on Mark Andrews, that was a big play that won that game. I guess I don't really have a question for you, but my argument would be it's on the defense.
Yeah.
The defense has to produce.
Well, and I guess what I would add to that is that nobody's asking for the defense to hold, Mahomes to 10 points a game or 15 points a game. They're just looking for average, right? Give me average. I mean, you might have written this, and I feel like it's a stat that doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, the Chiefs scored was 32 points in the AFC Championship game. That was the most they had scored in what, 20 games? Something ridiculous, like going back to the 2013 season. So, I mean, you're looking for them to hold them to 28. 28, they win, right? It's a reasonable number. It's not like, again, it's not like, you got to pitch a shutout or hold them to 10 or even 17. Hold them to 24, for God's sakes, I mean, like, the Bills are going to get 27. You're feeling pretty good with Josh Allen that you're going to get in that 27 to 30 range. So that means you got to get, you got to hold them to 24 to 27. And that, to me, is a reasonable number. That isn't asking for the, 2000 Baltimore Ravens defense, right? We don't need Ray Lewis and Ed Reed out there throwing a shutout, but they've got to give, a better effort than 32, giving up the most points that Chiefs team, had scored in 20-something games or whatever it was.
36 games. You got to go all the way back to September 24th of 2023, right? And they did it without Rashee Rice.
Yeah,
he's out.
That to me, I'll say it again. I can't believe that doesn't get talked about a little bit more. That is a crazy, crazy number. Think about how many teams were doing better defensively against the Chiefs over that time, holding them to a lesser number. So we're not asking for that much from this defense, and so when you talk about it being on the defense, that's the number that I point to. That Bills defense gave up the most points since September of 2023, and I get it. It's Mahomes. He's great. But he hadn't been great, I shouldn't say that. Their offense hadn't produced those type of great results in a long, long time. And that is pretty damning to the defense. And I think a big reason, when you talk to Brandon Beane, and as you did at length in this spring, about knowing that he had to rebuild the defense, I start right there and say, you darn well better, because your defense did something that, Mahomes and company hadn't done in a long time. And they did it, against a team that's supposed to be better than that, quite frankly, and a defense that's supposed to be better than that.
Man, NFL Network is just dead set, I guess, on opening up the wounds of Bills fans and just pouring salt into it all June and July. Every time I turned it on, I feel like one of these Bills Chiefs games is on. I was rewatching 13 Seconds, and not that I forgot this, but it is something to really zero in on it. Tyreek Hill had that touchdown the drive before, right? Where he catches a crosser on Levi Wallace and just completely loops around Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, just makes them look like their feet are lodged in cement. And that plays into the coverage on 13 seconds when you've got your safeties lined up in another area code. And they're just, the fear of God that Tyreek Hill might catch a ball and be gone. Justifiable to an extent, but then that's what created, X amount of yards, Bucker, overtime, ball game. But that's exactly the point you're making. Tyreek Hill's gone. Like this is not the explosive Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce in his prime, Kansas City Chiefs, and even I hesitate to say this because he is the greatest player in the league. I just did our quarterback ranking, all-time Super Bowl era. I got Mahomes number 2 right after Tom Brady. When it's all said and done, maybe he is the greatest ever. I was chatting with, let's call him an AFC front office executive who watches Mahomes closely, and he was trying to explain to me that Mahomes better be a little careful and take care of his body. He thinks he's slipping athletically, physically, just a tad, that he's not moving quite like he used to early in his career. So it showed in the Philly game. And I guess that kind of brings me to the optimism I have for the Bills. Right, I hesitate saying this because, of course, Mahomes, again, will have another game that's 99th percentile against the Bills in the playoffs because that's what he always does. But maybe you're not getting vintage A-plus Patrick Mahomes this January, the 5th time around, right? Maybe.
I mean, listen. I mean, I don't know how you could come away from that Super Bowl saying that Mahomes doesn't have a little bit to prove coming out of that. I mean, he looked human. He looked as human as he has probably ever looked since, honestly, coming into the league, right? I mean, the guy lit the league on fire pretty much from the moment he got into the lineup, right? He was great. He has been great forever, historically, but in that game, he wasn't great. He looked human. I mean, we sat there and we watched it and we're thinking, I mean, yeah, I know the Eagles were on him, but he was not making plays of any
Yeah.
sort. He wasn't making a guy miss. He wasn't doing the things that, Larry, let's compare him. He wasn't doing the things that Josh Allen does sometimes, right? When everything looks like it's broken around him and Allen finds a way. In that game, it didn't happen for Mahomes. And I do think that, listen, I know it's, the late June, early July storylines in the NFL can get a bit ridiculous, right? But the idea that I see recently that there's talk in Kansas City maybe about him and the shape that he's in and that kind of thing. And I guess what I'm saying is you're going to have a motivated all-time great coming into this season, willing to show or wanting to show, I guess I should say, that the last performance, the last time we saw him on the field, is not who he is, and that he's better than that Super Bowl showing. And so, for the Bills and for the rest of the AFC, I think they know that that's the challenge. But we've spent so much time talking Bills and Chiefs. It's like we can't forget, the Ravens and how good they are, and the Bengals. Can they figure it out with Joe Burrow defensively? Because Burrow, talent wise and numbers wise, statistically, would be the MVP if that team makes it into the playoffs probably last year. And so, the AFC is loaded at quarterback, and you get to CJ Stroud and Justin Herbert and that next wave of guys who are
Yeah.
eager to break into this, kind of, echelon that we're talking about with Allen and Burrow and Mahomes and Jackson. And so the road for any of these teams, Bills, Chiefs, or otherwise, is not going to be easy. When you get to the AFC playoffs, you're going to have to beat a darn good quarterback. And to me, I think, I know the Chiefs have won in Buffalo once during this playoff run, but I'd still like to see that game played in Orchard Park. And I think the Bills, I mean, Tyler, think about the emotion that would be in that stadium if we're talking about the AFC Championship game being the last game ever played at Highmark Stadium, right? If
Good
I'm Sean
Lord.
McDermott, that's what I am. That's the day one message at training camp. Imagine that scene, right? And for the players who have been here, and even for the new ones, they'll learn quickly. But this whole season, I think, is going to have, the crowd is going to add an element of emotion to this. It's going to be, as that gets closer, right, and this stadium closes, and all the memories that people have had there. I mean, what better way for that stadium to go out than to host the AFC Championship game?
And I tell you what, if they don't welcome Rob Johnson back to wave
Yeah.
that flag for that game,
I mean, if
there's
right?
hell to pay. Love Rob. Love me some Rob Johnson. We gotta get him back on here.
Me too. Me too. I'm a big fan.
Oh,
As you know, we've talked. I think you actually helped me get in touch with him one time for a story. First ring, and the guy was just he
oh,
would 45 minutes he'd talk to you. Yeah, great guy.
he'll drop everything. He's got like 4 or 5 kids doing a million different things too, playing collegiate sports, and that's just the kind of guy he is. He'll drop everything and just talk to you. And it's like I remember Jim Boeheim used to have this intonation in his voice after about like 7 or 8 minutes on the phone where he'd kind of throw in, all right, now like he at no point does Rob do that. Like at no point is he ready just to rush off the phone at all.
Right.
So
No, you're right. You're right.
and clearly that's why he was better than Doug Flutie. Just a better guy. What can you say? All right, to put a bow on the defense, I have to repeat these stats because we can't have this conversation without kind of hitting the reset button and reminding everybody that since they collapsed against the Houston Texans in the 2019 wild card game, we're not even including that game, the Buffalo defenses faced 40 non-kneel down drives. Of those 40, they've allowed 22 touchdowns, 9 field goals, forced only 8 punts. There's a missed field goal. They've created 2 turnovers, and they've allowed 166 points, good for 4.15 per non-kneel down drive. And you can make the argument that that final kneel down drive in Kansas City was about as bad as any of them. Where I mean, we forget that, right? Yeah, they didn't convert the 4th and 5, but then Mahomes just kills Buffalo off with a pair of easy does it throws into the flats. Let's get to Dalton Kincaid. Everybody out there, please subscribe to both of our sites, the Buffalo News, Go Long, all the Dalton Kincaid coverage you could possibly want right there. It was really insightful, I think, for both of us to chat with him at length about everything he went through physically with the knees. And you got into that, and we got into the mental from that night forward, how he was able to move on. But let's start with you, Jay. What was your takeaway from your conversation with Dalton?
Yeah, it's funny as you were kind of previewing this segment, you just used a word there, insightful. That is not a word that I would have pretty much ever used to describe a conversation that I had had with Dalton Kincaid through his first 2 years until this most recent one. And it was like talking to a different guy. And again, I know that this is a part of journalism and sports media that fans don't necessarily care about. They care about their team whether they win or lose. They don't care at all, or very much, I should say, about whether their head coach or their favorite player or favorite team players are good interviews necessarily, right? That's why Bill Belichick can grunt through 20 years of press conferences because he wins, right? But Dalton Kincaid, had he, and again, this is not to say that he was a bad guy, and some guys are more comfortable in talking to the media than others. But I had never found him to be particularly insightful about any topic, honestly. I've not, but when I talked to him during the spring, it was like talking to a different guy. I mean, he was more than willing, more than open about what he had gone through the first couple of years, playing through an injury, not living up to the expectations that fans and media have for him as a first round pick that the team traded up for. I found it to be a really enlightening conversation, and I was surprised because that is not the guy that I have gotten to know the first couple of years. Again, does that matter? Not much, right? What matters is the results in September, October, November. Can he come back healthy? Can he be the type of impactful receiver, receiving tight end that he was supposed to be when he was drafted? And we'll learn that, right? But I found a guy that my takeaway from the conversation was this is a mature young player who recognizes that he's got to be better, who recognizes that, the first couple seasons of his career have not gone the way that he would want them to go, the way that the team would want them to go, the way that the fan base would want them to go. He said a lot of the right things in terms of, I've stayed in Buffalo. I'm working with the athletic training staff. I'm trying to get healthier. I'm trying to figure out ways to get through a season healthy. I'm talking to veterans who have done it to ask them what are their secrets and how have they stayed healthy. Those are all the things that you want to be hearing from Dalton Kincaid, right? And so I think it was a very productive, enlightening conversation with a guy that knows what has to be done, knows what hasn't been done to this point in his career, And sounds like he has a plan to get there. And now, again, now we kind of wait. We see what happens in training camp in the preseason. But really, what matters is we see what happens starting in September when the games start to count for real and the production. But I think I would say, just to kind of wrap my part of this up, that he is a guy that is doing everything that he can to live up to those expectations. And that's what you want out of a player. That's what you expect and hope that you hear from a player.
100%. I never talked to Dalton Kincaid myself before our conversation there at minicamp, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but I had the same takeaway. Really open, really honest. You don't really know going into a conversation with any player for the first time how that's going to go, especially one who went through, in terms of football speak, a traumatic thing.
Yeah.
I mean, he caught a lot of shit
Yeah.
locally, nationally, 4th and 5. It wasn't easy, right? He had to kind of do a 180 and dive. I mean, everybody has seen the play. It wasn't an easy play to make, but it's one that a first round talent is expected to make. He knows that, he owns it, and we didn't really have to tiptoe into it. Like I wasn't really sure. Like, is this something where you have to kind of ease and
Mm-hmm.
cautiously tiptoe around those grenades before you bring it up? And he's holding eye contact. He's more than willing to chat about that moment. That was rough. I mean, he was in tears after that game, quote unquote, numb, completely numb. And again, people can check out the story for more detail. But inside that locker room, as everybody's consoling him and trying to make him feel better, it was Micah Hyde, he said, who came up to him and said, like, fucking own it. Fucking wipe those tears away. You got to talk to the media. And Micah Hyde went through it in Green Bay 11 years prior. 2013 wildcard game, San Francisco, Lambeau Field, 2020, 4 minutes left. Kaepernick throws a ball. It's a little high. It's not an easy pick to make, but he undercut the Anquan Bolden route to the sideline and dropped what would have been a pick six. Maybe that's a Packer team that could have gone the distance and won it all. Micah Hyde never got a ring himself. He came on after that 2010 team. So he could relate, and I think he wished that maybe a vet kind of gave it to him straight. From what I remember, he did talk to the media himself, but I think he wished he had that tough love, and he gave Dalton Kincaid that tough love. And in a way, that helped Dalton kind of snap out of it, board that charter flight back, watch the game. They don't have to. It's not like the Bills are gathering to break down the film after a season ends. But he did it. He watched all 3 hours, met with McDermott, met with Bean. They told him he had to get stronger. They told him to turn the page fast, and he did. And as he told both of us, he lived at One Bills Drive. He's bringing his golden doodle to throw the frisbee around. I think there were many days he's really the only player there, working with Will Greenberg and this entire staff, trying to strengthen up, well, maintain his agility, his athletic ability, kind of incorporate those exercises so he doesn't just become this fossil, like this dinosaur from 1994 inline blocker. And I think there's something to buy here. I think that he is this 6'4", 245-pound. He's muscular, but not too muscular. If we're going to get to the nitty-gritty football element of this all, Jay, I can see the Bills trying to get some yak out of him this year. There was a point at Utah, their tight ends coach told me that like they really try to emphasize yak and get him to become a weapon after the catch. When we think of Dalton Kincaid, we think splitting the seam, getting upfield. I can see Joe Brady maybe trying to scheme up some stuff for him where he catches the ball and he turns into a physical weapon. I mean, Fred Whittingham, his coach, basically said, he's George Kittle, only better as a receiver, which is pretty high praise.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess I'd say I want to see that, right?
Right.
But I think that yeah, with Kincaid, and I'm glad you brought up the strength thing, right? Because that kind of almost got lost a little bit when he revealed to me that he was playing through not one but two different knee injuries,
And it's that other one I think that was worse. They were both bad, but
yeah,
that buildup of fluid, right?
yeah.
The bursitis, that was rough.
Yeah, and he said like one would start feeling good and then the other one would be bothering him, and so and I think if you go back and listen to some of his teammates, he's obviously very close with Dawson Knox. Dawson is one of the stand-up guys, kind of one of the leaders in that locker room, and he kind of let on at the end of the season. You could tell that like, listen, you guys don't know the full extent of what this guy was playing through. He was probably more hurt than what
Mhm.
he let on, and so I think he gets full marks and credit for doing his best to try to play through that stuff. And we can't take that away from him. And so, with an off season to get healthy, as you said, spending the time that he did in Orchard Park, I go back to what, McDermott and Bean said at the end of the year, challenging him to be a little stronger. And honestly, I've probably been as hard on Dalton Kincaid as anybody in the local media. I didn't like hearing that, right? Because listen, it's not like this guy was a rookie. This was his second year in the league. Why didn't you have that conversation with him after his rookie year? Or if you did, why didn't it happen, right? And so I think that, to know that he took that to heart and is, making the strides that he is to improve on that is a good sign. The thing that I go back to with Kincaid, and one of the things that is troublesome, I guess, to me is, even as a rookie, I know the catch numbers were prolific, right? 70 plus, I think maybe 75 exactly, right around there. But how many of those were impactful, right? And the yards per catch was not real dynamic, and
9.
yeah, it's low. And I've floated that question a couple of times on social media. How many truly impactful plays has Dalton Kincaid made? I know if you go to the Detroit game, it was this season, ended up being a terrific offensive performance for the Bills. He had a big catch in that one, but those type of moments to me have been much too far and few in between. And so there's a lot riding on Dalton Kincaid in his third year. Bills have a decision to make, right, after this season about his fifth-year option. And right now, I don't know that you'd say that they would pick it up. I think so. It's a big year for him contractually. It's a big year for the team, obviously, as we've talked at length about. But I think let's just talk individually for Dalton Kincaid. He needs to have a good year.
Out of that whole bunch, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Joshua Palmer, Dawson Knox, Curtis Samuel, Elijah Moore. Those Elijah Moore X clips are getting everybody stirred up in a frenzy, baby. It's that time of year. If you look good in shorts, now's the time you want to put that content out. I'll say he looked really good running those routes wherever he was, some camp somewhere. Out of that whole group, give me Dalton Kincaid, though. Talent-wise, mismatch-wise, man, if he can create some separation, he's going to catch Josh Allen's eye. Like a lot of these quarterbacks, I mean, that tight end is usually the closest to you. And if he can get on a linebacker, if he can get on a nickel, he's going to be a tough cover. I think with that strength, with that athletic ability, you need somebody. Everyone eats. It's cultish at this point, right? We hear it all the time. It's stitched across Josh's hat when he came back. There is something to it. They scored 30 points a game, had 31 in 8 straight games at one point. You still look. You made this point earlier in this conversation, Jay. AFC Championship game. You need somebody to make a play. Like Mac Hollins shouldn't be leading your team in receiving. You need somebody. 3rd and 8 or 4th and 5 in that case. We're going to this dude because he is a dude. He's the baddest mother effer on the planet. He's going to win. Let's prioritize this player. Let's game plan this player on this route, this moment. I think one of my takeaways was I wasn't sure personality-wise what Dalton Kincaid was going to be like. Right? He's got those blue eyes and the golden locks, and he's so kind. I think I wrote something like, off of Abbott Road, he almost comes across as somebody you'd see on Sesame Street watching with the little ones. He's just so nice. But he's got some nastiness to him. He's got an edge. This is somebody who had cracks in his vertebrae at Utah and did play in the Pac-12 championship game and wanted to play in a bowl game with this stuff. They had to hold him out. Like, he is a tough son of a gun. I think he'll get after it as a blocker. And I think that competitively, he's wired the right way to respond the right way. And you go through history with all these tight ends. I mean, it's in our story. Tony Gonzalez, year 2, he led the NFL in drops, 16. I mean, he's locking himself in his bedroom, state of quote-unquote self-loathing, drinking Jack and Cokes, depressed, doesn't know what to. He looks in the mirror and says, you know what? I'm doing everything the coaches want me to do, but what can I do? It was an epiphany. Like, you've got to have that man-in-the-mirror moment. And a lot of these tight end grades, they have it. Kittle getting with the sports psychologist at Iowa. Rob Gronkowski. Oh, my God. I'm rambling here. I'm sorry. But, it's easy to forget that once upon a time, he misses that Hail Mary by inches on the deflection, parties his ass off in Indianapolis at Victory Field, aptly named, I mean, remember the hell that he caught from Rodney Harris and all those expatriates? And we're wondering, man, what's he doing? Celebrating after a loss? He just continued to party his ass off, be himself, and become the greatest tight end ever. Even a Mike Ditka when he got traded to Philadelphia in a really rough spot, depressed. We talked about it for Blood and Guts. I mean, he would just drink every night, wake up in strange places, not know how he got there. That was a little later in his career, but he had his man in the mirror moment. I think Kincaid kind of recognized this as, I've got to do something. Like,
Yeah.
year 3, it's all on the line. The Bills need me. And he backed it up in the offseason. Right? The offseason's the offseason, I get it. But man, he poured himself into the work. I think we're going to see a different Dalton Kincaid, a different weapon, a top 5 tight end, maybe even top 3 when it's all said and done.
Well, yeah, a few things there. One, the Mac Hollins point is perfect, right? It's great because Mac Hollins had a nice season in Buffalo. He certainly did. He contributed. But he's not the guy that was supposed to be making plays in the AFC Championship game. Full credit to him for making them, but that's not what he was brought here to necessarily to do. I mean, that's why Dalton Kincaid was drafted in the first round and Keon Coleman was drafted with the first pick of the second round. Those were supposed to be the difference maker guys. And the rest of the stuff about the tight end. Listen, if there's one guy in our business that knows the position, it's you, who's legitimately written the book about it. So I'm letting you roll on that. But yeah, I think Kincaid. I do think that he is a more competitive than he maybe lets on in terms of, or the impression that he gives. Like, yeah, I've heard from a lot of his teammates that he is ultra competitive, right? And so. Yeah, I agree with those points. I'm interested in borderline fascinated to see what this third season brings for him because, I mentioned the 75 catches as a rookie. I wonder, and maybe you asked him about this. I did not, but the next time I, talk to him, if he's still willing to be as insightful as he has been the last couple of interviews he's done, was there a part of him that maybe naturally had a letdown after that rookie season and said, well, man, I caught 75 balls as a rookie. I set a team record. I was, I think, 4th most in league history by a tight end, a rookie tight end. Was there a natural maybe easing off the gas pedal a little bit where he thought, I kind of got this league figured out, because a lot of times you think year 1 to year 2 that it's going to be an improvement for players, right? And Sean McDermott has talked about this a lot. Sometimes rookies come in and find immediate success, whether their opponents don't know their game that much, there isn't the amount of film out on them to study, or they're eager, they're hungry to come in and show they belong in the league. But McDermott has talked a lot about sometimes the challenge from year 1 to year 2 is to back it up because they think they got the league figured out, and then they realize all of a sudden they don't. So I wonder, how much of that was at play with Kincaid and him realizing and recognizing, I need to be talking to veterans about how they stay healthy because I haven't done it. Or I need to, rededicate myself. And instead of going to Cabo for 3 weeks during this break, I'm going to stay in Buffalo and I'm going to work with Will Greenberg and the training staff, That I think that's part of this too.
He did too. And it's hard for people who don't live here to know what it's really like in Western New York, February to March to April, especially this specific off season. It gets miserable, man. It's cold. It's wintry. I know it. I'm in the snow belt here for a little bit more in Boston cold. And I mean, you're having to get the hair dryer out to melt the snow inside your snow blower, to scoop that out with your hands. And then you just hope the thing doesn't break down because the snow is so thick. Like it sucks, man. And off of the AFC Championship loss, when everybody is talking about you a certain way and you're getting death threats, I get it. I get why a lot of these tight ends double down, triple down on that numb feeling and throwbacks and drinks like Tony Gonzalez and Gronk for different reasons did. But to stay here and to work like he did, it does take a concerted effort. And, I think he did take some advice from those veterans. He brought up Mac Hollins and seeing how he continued to lift weights hard, like as the season continued, and to November, December, January. That's something that Dalton Kincaid, maybe it's the fact that he was a basketball player growing up so much. Hell, I remember playing basketball back in the day. You didn't want to lift weights in high school. It's going to throw off the jump shot, right? And I imagine there's football players that are thinking the same way. Like, I don't want to lift weights. It's going to make me sore for Sunday. Like, Sunday's going to be a 3-hour car wreck. Why do I want to be sore doing bench presses and power cleans? He saw that Mac Hollins, it worked for him. Like, he got stronger. He was fresher. He was kind of armoring himself up. We've heard Brandon Beane use that term for combat, for Sunday. That's something that Dalton Kincaid plans on doing this year as well. We'll see if it works.
Yeah, right.
To wrap it up, though, because my wife is in there right now with 3 children. I think Sonny just woke up from his nap. So we got an Ella, Sonny, Rocco situation in there. So some assistance is probably needed, I'm going to guess. It's great, by the way. I think everybody, have all the kids in the world. Having 3 has been awesome. Jay, give me your AFC East. 1, 2, 3, 4. Finish right now.
Okay.
July.
Yeah. All right. I'll go 1 Bills. That's an easy one. 2, I will go. Man, this is. I'm flipping a coin between the Patriots and the Dolphins. I do think the Patriots are going to be improved. You know, honestly, listen, they were a meaningless win against the Bills away from the number 1 overall pick, right? So there almost isn't anywhere to go but up for them. I'm not quite as high on them, I feel like, as a lot of people. A lot of people thinking they're going to take this really massive jump. I think they could double their win total, and that only gets them to 8, right? So for now, I'll put the Dolphins in there at number 2, maybe at like a 9-8 type of a season. I'll go New England at 3, and then I think the Jets are pretty clearly number 4. I'm not a big believer in the Justin Fields experiment. I don't know that offensively they're going to be able to compete in that division. I think the Aaron Glenn hire, I think he's brought some much needed professionalism to that organization. But I feel like they're kind of the clear number 4, at least right now, in terms of where they're at in a rebuild. So I'll go Bills, Dolphins, Patriots, Jets.
You know what? I wish that I had something crazy to throw at you, but I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I think the Bills win the division. They do what they do. They'll win 11, 12 games. Getting those tough opponents at home is huge. They were just a runaway freight train at home last season. All 3 phases. So it comes down to New England or Miami. Early in the offseason, I'd say New England. I just love these moves for Mike Vrabel. Up and down the roster, Milton Williams, they had to pay a lot of money for him, but you saw what he did in the Super Bowl. Harold Landry, Robert Spillane, Carlton Davis, to the draft to get Will Campbell out of LSU. You're getting players who fit that Mike Vrabel mold. He wants ass kickers. He wants guys that are going to take no prisoners and bring his message to life. I mean, then they drafted Travion Henderson to pair with Ramondre Stevenson. They're going to try to run the ball. I like Drake May a lot. Let's see it. I think there are a lot of signs for hope. If Stephon Diggs can get back to football at some point, I know he's probably on a boat somewhere doing who knows what on a mid-July day. Not going the Dalton Kincaid route. Stephon Diggs this offseason. For better or worse, hey, maybe that's the way. Maybe that's what you got to do. You got to find yourself a Cardi B and live a little. I don't think so, but he's taking that approach. I'm excited about the Patriots. They got a soft schedule too. I'm still going Miami too, though. I feel like, man, I take that Tua bait often, and I'm gonna nibble on the Tua bait right now and the Dolphins bait just because. Look, it took a 61-yard field goal from Tyler Bass for Buffalo to beat the Dolphins at home. Yeah. When Tua came back from that concussion, it's always the if he can stay healthy. I mean, it's life and it's bigger than football for Tua Tagovailoa when it comes to brain injuries and trauma. If he's out there, he played really damn well against not great teams at times, but even against the Bills, I think it was 25-28. He got into a bit of a rhythm. If Tua and Mike McDaniel and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle can rev that thing up and get Devon Achane going in the run game, I think that offensively they'll be fine. They'll have those moments, maybe not 60 points against Denver. Defensively, it's about health. I mean, they were a shell of themselves in that de facto AFC East championship game a couple years ago. My God, I don't even remember who was on the field for them at that point. Maybe Bruce Irvin. You still got 2 good edge rushers in Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Adding Minka Fitzpatrick, getting rid of Jalen Ramsey, I think that's a plus move for Miami. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but I think they make the playoffs. I think Miami gets into the playoffs.
And I think, you got to factor in, like, Mike McDaniel's probably looking at it and thinking, if I don't, I'm probably out, right? I mean, I think they were, they maybe were close to considering a change last offseason. I think if this thing goes south for Miami this year and they miss the playoffs, and I'm not, I don't love a lot of what I hear out of Miami, right? The culture and players leaving there, and some of the things that they have to say when they're not there, but. The talent is undeniable, right? And the big if, as you mentioned, with Tua, got to stay healthy. But when he has the offense is good, and Tyreek Hill is still Tyreek Hill. Maybe not. Maybe he's lost a quarter of a step, but he's still probably the fastest guy in the league. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure in Miami to win now. Does that mean I think that they're among the upper echelon of elite teams in the AFC? I certainly do not. But I think with 7 making the playoffs in the conference, I think that they have the talent to be a playoff team.
Drafting nothing but offensive and defensive linemen in the first 2 rounds the last 2 years. Bit by bit, baby steps. Maybe you can become a tougher team that can win in December. Maybe they're giving themselves a chance. You can't go out and sign anybody. I mean, you paid Tua $55 million a year. It's kind of on Tua to elevate others after maybe the others elevated him to kind of rejuvenate his career. So it'll be interesting,
Yeah.
Jay. Man, great having you back.
Of
Any
course.
final thoughts? You gonna hit the course here soon?
What do we got? Well, we got about a week here before camp starts, so definitely going to get a few rounds in, and yeah, just try to enjoy. You know how this summer goes, man. When camp starts, it's like our unofficial end of summer. It goes quick in Western New York. So yeah, definitely going to try to enjoy this. What we got left of this week. Go check out the Porter Cup, big amateur golf tournament that I'll be watching a little bit of. Looking forward to that. But other than that, no, it's just yeah, kind of getting ready here for training camp, and I'm sure we'll see go long out there in Pittsford at least a time or two, and looking forward to that and being with you again whenever you decide to have me back.
Hell yeah, man. We'll absolutely be out there for one of those early days of camp for the Bills. It does seem like it starts sooner and sooner, but maybe
Yeah,
that's just us getting older and older. I'm not quite sure where those lines cross, but yes, excited for real football. The pad's coming on. A ton to discuss. So thanks everybody for listening, subscribing. Go along. We're completely powered by you. No ads, no sponsors. And here's the line I've been throwing in lately, Jay. No gambling blood money. Right?
That's
Goodell and the
right.
owners are slipping into the bed sheets with DraftKings and FanDuel. Maybe you
Yeah.
got to keep your lips sealed. I'm not sure where the Buffalo News stands, but I'm going to throw that at people. Like, we're not going to support you ruining your life with these gambling apps here at Go Along because
I,
it's all on the people who subscribe. Nothing else.
you stay true to your word, and I appreciate that about you.
Do you gamble?
No, no, I don't.
Okay, good.
I'm not any. Yeah, I mean, I'm not good enough at it to do it.
It's a skill.
I don't like even the casino. Like I mean, I'll play a couple hands of blackjack or something like that, and then
We went to the one in New Orleans Super Bowl week. Remember? We were
yeah,
just. Hey, I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
think either one of us placed a bet. We were just watching a basketball game.
So the Super Bowl 2 years ago was in Vegas, and I remember walking. I went to a show at the Sphere, and I walked back to my hotel, which was like a 2 mile walk. But I was like, oh, you know what? I'll go down the strip and I'll just walk through some of these casinos. And I remember the table limits. It was like Friday night before the Super Bowl, and the table limits were like $200 a hand. And I remember like being nervous for the people sitting there.
Yeah.
Like it's not even my money, and I was nervous for them, like watching this happen. And
Yeah.
so. No, I can't. I just couldn't get on board with watching $200 of my hard-earned money go poof because the dealer has 15 and flops a 6 in blackjack.
I mean, it always comes back to The Sopranos. They were ahead of their time. Who was the character? The the dad from his kid's school that kind of gets
He
involved with
was
Tony's stuff, and then he just
yeah. He owned the
completely
sporting
blows his
goods.
life savings. What was
He
his
owned the
name?
sporting goods store.
Yes, yes, him.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I know. And then he's got yeah, yeah.
There's
What a
so many of those
classic
guys
casino.
today.
Yeah.
I mean, they got to be all like they're walking amongst us day to day.
Everywhere. Yeah, everywhere. It is everywhere, and it's crazy to think. Not to get too much of a tangent, but just how the mere word of Pete Rose gets a lifetime ban from baseball, right? And now it's you can't turn on a game without it being presented by DraftKings, right? And
Yeah.
so it's crazy how things have changed in that regard.
This was awesome, Jay. Thanks so much, brother.
All right, buddy, you got it.